So one day I ran outside and saw a watermelon, so I ran to it. I picked it up and then ran it back to my house to open it up the only way I knew how, with rubber bands. I put some rubber bands on it and then I got a sheet for when it breaks. And then I continued placing rubber bands on it with the help of my brother, and it was starting to actually work. I kept doing it, and then my brother drew a face on it. Henry! And then we just kept going until eventually we ran out of good rubber bands. So I was left with no choice but to run out in the rain, get in my car, and drive to Walmart. I got there, got my rubber bands, and then headed back home to get back to placing them. And eventually I could even see the indentation in the watermelon. And then I actually predicted it.
It's gonna bust.
When?
Any second.
Oh, God.
I just know it.
Instant replay. And it left this water rubber bands, like for me to turn it into a rubber band ball, part 2. Part 2, putting rubber bands on a watermelon. So it exploded and left us with this water rubber bands. So I decided to turn it into a rubber band ball with all the leftover rubber bands. I began by making the wad a lot neater, and I discovered this.
There's watermelon inside this.
So I did my best to get it out and then kept making it neater, and then eventually started placing actual rubber bands on it. And after a while, I took a break to go shoot some hoops with it. And let's just say it's not a basketball, and I ended up breaking my backboard more than it was already. And then I waited till the next day at like 2 in the morning to start trying to place more rubber bands on it. I finished my pile and started placing another bag, and eventually I was down to the last one. And to be honest, it was a lot of time for very little difference, but I got another bag anyway and started placing them. I finished it up and I had a ball, I guess. Let me know if I should even keep doing this. Part 3 of making a rubber band ball. So this watermelon exploded and left us with this water rubber bands. So I turned it into this actual rubber band ball, and now we're here and I'm out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. I got some rubber bands and then went home and emptied them out and opened up a bag. And got busy. But after a little bit I left and then came back the next day. And finished off the pile. And then I dumped out 2 more bags and started placing them. But I got bored and ended up leaving and coming back again the next day to finish it all off. I placed rubber bands forever, and then I went outside to test it out on my broken hoop. Yeah, it was hard to play with, but it bounced really high. Here's it next to a basketball. Yeah. After that, I went back inside to finish off the pile, and then I dumped out another 2 bags and started placing rubber bands for what felt like an eternity. And I was finally down to the last bag. I put them all on, and I was done. And it's pretty big, but it's going to take like 1,000,000 likes for me to keep going. Part 4 of making a rubber band ball. So this watermelon exploded and left us with this water rubber bands, and I've been adding a lot of rubber bands to it. And I said it would take 1,000,000 likes for me to keep going, and it got 4,000,000. So I went to Walmart, got more rubber bands, and then left, went home, set them down, and opened them up. And then the next day, I got on that rubber band grind, placing the entire pile on the ball. And when I was done, I left and came back again later to place another bag on. And once I finished that ball, it was pretty big, like the size of my head. I weighed it, and it weighed 5 pounds. And it also bounced pretty high, and made a decent basketball for my broken hoop. And after that, my brother wanted to play some bands, so I let him. But he gave up, and I ended up having to finish his pile off. And after that, I only had 1 more big pile left, so I dumped it all out and started placing them. I finished it up and then started on the bag of thicker rubber bands. And now I'm out. This sucked a lot, and since the last post got like 4,000,000 likes, it's going to take like 5,000,000 likes now for me to keep going. So one day I decided to see how much a pawn shop would give me for my rubber band ball. So I got in my car and drove out to one, but it was closed for another 30 minutes. So I waited, ate a burrito, and then went back in and said,
I got this rubber band ball.
Okay.
I want to sell for $200.
Why do you think it's worth $200?
I put a lot of time into it. It's a lot of rubber bands,
How many rubber bands are in there?
like 14 bags.
How many is in a bag?
I have no idea. But it weighs 6.5 pounds.
Wow, does it bounce? Wow, bounce is pretty good. Well, how old are you?
16.
You gotta be 18 before you can do anything with it.
and then he said he'd give me $100 for it if I counted all the rubber bands and had someone 18 sell it for me. So I thought about it and said,
200.
No, I can't go 200 on it, but that'd be worth just watching you count that many rubber bands for $100.
500.
I couldn't get $500 out of a rubber ball.
How much do you think you could sell this for?
$50.
I'm gonna have to walk.
All right. Appreciate you coming in.
So then I walked out with my rubber band ball, and I guess I'm just going to have to keep adding bands. Part 5 of making a giant rubber band ball. So I've been making this rubber band ball, and I ran out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. Got a bunch more rubber bands, and then I went home, dumped 2 bags out, put some gloves on so I didn't break my skin again, and started placing the bands. And then left and came back the next day to finish off the pile. It looked pretty good so far, and then I forgot to video placing a whole nother bag. But it looks like this, and then I dumped out all the colored rubber bands and started placing them all on the rubber band ball. And I was done, and it was almost the size of my head and weighed 8.2 pounds. And bounced pretty high. And also made a decent basketball, like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it now weighs 8.2 pounds, but I want it bigger, so I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, then went home, dumped them out, put some gloves on, then emptied out 2 bags of colored rubber bands, and got busy placing the entire pile. And after I finished the colored rubber bands, I dumped out 3 bags of normal rubber bands and placed that. I placed a bunch, but then left and came back the next day to place some more. It got tiring and I placed a lot of rubber bands, so I left, took another break, and came back and started on it again. I was sure to place the whole bag this time, but I got too tired and had to leave and come back again the next day to finish it off. So that's what I did, and I finished it up. And it was done. It weighed 10 pounds, was bigger than my head, and bounced pretty high. Like if you want me to keep going. Part 7 of making a rubber band ball. So I've been making this ball, and it's pretty giant now and weighs 10 pounds. But I wanted it bigger, so I went to Walmart, got a bunch of colored rubber bands, then went home, dumped them out, put my gloves on, and first finished off the pile of normal rubber bands that was already on the table. And once I was done with that, I dumped out all the bags of colored rubber bands and began placing them. I did this for quite a while, and the ball was finished, and it was huge. And it now weighs 11.9 pounds and is almost the size of a basketball. And it also bounces pretty high. And I also shot it in the hoop. And now I'm officially finished with it. It looks pretty cool. So one day I decided to take my 12.9 pound rubber band ball and see how high it would bounce off a building. But first in the street, and then in the hoop. And then I got a ladder and climbed up to the roof of my house with the ball to throw it off. I threw it off and it bounced pretty high and went into the yard. And then I tried to go up even higher to throw it off and just dropped the ball and almost took out my brother. And then I went down so I didn't fall off. I put the ball in my car and took it to a parking garage to throw it off that. I walked up there and tossed the ball off. Yeah, it bounced pretty high. And then I went back up all cinematic with the ball, ran around, and then I fell. But I got back up, took my ball to the edge, and bounced it off. And then celebrated. Full vid will be on my YouTube. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it now weighs 11.9 pounds and is the size of a basketball. And I was going to stop, but everyone wanted me to keep going, so I went to Walmart, got some more bands, then went home, dumped them out, put some gloves on, and got back at it. I started by placing the pile of colored rubber bands because it's easier to place, and once I was done with that, I weighed it, and it was 12.9 pounds, and still bounced pretty high, and made a good basketball. Then I went to Walmart to get more colored rubber bands, but they were out, so I just got the normal ones and went home, dumped that out, and placed that entire pile. I finished it off, and it was now 13.4 pounds, and still the size of a basketball, and still bounced pretty high. Like if you want me to keep going and just see how big I can make it. Rubber band ball part 9. So a lot of people don't know that it started when this watermelon exploded and left me with this wad of rubber bands. And ever since then I've just been adding on to it, and this is the entire compilation up until now. And I needed more colored rubber bands, so I went to Walmart, but they were out. So I got gas and went to a different Walmart. But they were out too, so I went to another one, and they finally had some. Then I went home, dumped out a bag, and then got busy placing the entire pile of rubber bands until I was done. And then I left and came back later. I dumped out the colored rubber bands and placed that entire pile. Then I found some more rubber bands in the floor, placed those, and then placed a bag of thicker rubber bands that I also found in the floor. And I was done. It now weighs 14.7 pounds, is the size of my head, and bounces pretty high. And it's also bigger than a basketball, like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it's pretty big now, but everyone wanted it bigger, so I went to Walmart to get more bands, but they were out, so I went to a different Walmart and got some. Then went home, set down a pile of bands, and got busy placing the entire thing until it was done. And then I dumped out a few more bags and first placed the bag of smaller rubber bands and then the bags of thicker rubber bands until I was done with that. And it now weighs nearly 16 pounds and still bounces pretty high, but it's hard to catch now. And it makes a decent basketball. Like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball and people seem to never want me to stop. So I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, and then went home to start placing them. I dumped out the little bags first and began placing all of those until I was done, which took a while. Then I left and came back later to place all of the colored rubber bands, which took even longer, but now it looks pretty. I left again and came back to place the last bag of thicker rubber bands, and it was finally done. And it now weighs 17.5 pounds, is bigger than my head, and is pretty hard to catch when you bounce it. And now it's noticeably bigger than a basketball, like if you want me to continue this ball. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and to be honest, at this point I'll probably never stop. So I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, then left, went home, dumped out all the colored rubber bands, and began placing them. Until I was done with the entire pile, which took a while. But I did it, then took a break and came back later to start on the pile of normal rubber bands. And I placed that entire pile, covering all the colored rubber bands. So sad. Then took another break, came back, and dumped out all the thicker rubber bands and began placing them, until I was out. And the ball now weighs 19.2 pounds and is a lot harder to throw and way harder to make a basket with. Yeah, it's pretty big, so like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball and it's getting pretty huge and I'm probably not stopping. So I went to Walmart, got all the colored rubber bands they had, then went home, dumped out the bag of normal rubber bands and placed that entire pile, which was kind of hard because of how big the rubber band ball is now. Then I took a couple days off and came back to place all 8 bags of colored rubber bands, which took a long while. But eventually I finished, and it's huge now. It weighs 21.6 pounds, and is a lot harder to throw and catch than it used to be, and almost impossible to make a basket with, like if you want me to keep going. So one day I wanted to see what all I could destroy from dropping my band ball up high. So I went to Walmart, got a chair, a Hot Wheel, a lot of Diet Coke, a container, and a watermelon. Then I went home, set up a ladder, and dropped the Diet Coke, and it did nothing. So I threw it, and then I dropped the band ball in another bottle. And when that failed, I shook it up and did it again. And it worked. And then my brother threw me one that I dropped. And after that, I decided to crush the Hot Wheel, and it held up pretty well. And then I dropped the 21-pound ball on the bin, and it did the most damage so far. But not enough. And after that was this tiny chair thing that got kind of broken, and I fell. Next, we dropped it on a water gun, and a piece came off. Then I shook the rest of the Diet Coke up and knocked them over, and then threw them all, one by one. And all this destroying was a lot like this game I've been playing where you drop and smash random stuff. Click the link in my bio if you want to download it. And lastly was the watermelon, and it got crushed. And I even ate some. So one day I decided to take my rubber band ball and a bunch of other random stuff to a pawn shop like I did before when my rubber band ball was a lot smaller. But now it's bigger and I'm back.
Oh yeah, it's a rubber ball. Oh, it's bigger. How many bands is it now?
I don't know. I brought some more items too. I made this in junior high, a one-of-a-kind CO2 car.
Did you win?
No.
Oh, it's a loser card.
He then looked at it and didn't want to buy it. So I showed him
This is
this.
a can of air.
It's about empty though.
Well, I used it a little bit.
And I said it was worth,
$50.
and he said no, so I showed him the next item.
I found this at an abandoned race car track. A genuine gold cup.
Then he asked why I thought it was gold.
It looks gold.
And he even tested it and found out it was stainless steel, so I brought out the rubber band
It's
ball.
probably the most famous rubber band ball you'll ever see. Its intrinsic value, probably $5,000.
How'd you come up with that value?
I just did.
He didn't want to buy it, but he gave me the good idea to put it on eBay.
Like eBay.
It's a neat idea. I might do that.
So then I left. Let me know if you think I should put it on eBay. So I've been making this rubber band ball for way longer than I thought I'd be, and I'm just going to keep going. So I went to Walmart and they were out of rubber bands, so I left and came back a few days later and they had some. I went home, dumped them all out into a pile, and started placing them. And it's honestly just so satisfying to watch the pile go down. And when I was done, I left and came back later with a new bag that I ordered on Amazon. And the band seemed good, so I placed the entire pile until I was done. And it now weighs 23.6 pounds, is way bigger than my head, and it's really hard to throw, and even harder to make a basket with. But I made one. Like if I should keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm just going to keep adding rubber bands every time Walmart restocks. So I went there, got a few more bags of colored rubber bands, then went home and started with the 2 bags I ordered on Amazon. I placed the entire pile until you couldn't see a colored rubber band in sight. And then I left and came back later to place the colored rubber bands I got at Walmart. And I placed it until I was done. It's huge and now weighs almost 26 pounds, is super hard to throw and really hard to catch, but I can still make a basket with it and even stand on it now. Well, kinda. Like if you think I should keep going. So as you probably know, I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and I needed more rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. But they were out of the ones I needed, so I went to a different Walmart, and they had some. Then I went home, dumped them all out, and got busy. And sped up, this all just looks really cool. Anyway, I finished that pile and took a break and came back later to finish this bag I ordered. And sadly, it's a lot less colorful now. But I'm done, and it now weighs 28.3 pounds and bounces decently. And I also made a basket. Like if I should keep going. So as you know, I have this giant rubber band ball, but now I want to make a little rubber band ball to show you how. I first wadded up a clump of bands and then wrapped them around each other until I had this. And then I started doubling up bands and adding them to the clump for a while until I had this. And after that, I just kept on going until I got to this. And it's pretty neat and bouncy. I went on for quite a while after this until it looked like this. And it's pretty cool and weighs a lot less than my other one, weighing 0, and this one weighing 28. And it's not even close to the size of my head. Here's me throwing the big one, and now here's me throwing the small one. Now a basket with the small one, a basket with the big one, eventually. And throwing the big one and throwing the small one. I had to run after it. Yeah, they're both pretty cool. So one day I got this comment that said to throw my rubber band ball up a hill, so I put it in my car and drove on out to a hill. I got out and carried it on up the hill, which was hard because it weighs 30 pounds, and I got to the top and threw it off. And it bounced and bounced and then started rolling, and it started bouncing again towards the bottom and went on out into the parking lot and just kept on going. And eventually I had to chase after it and jump over a fence, and I had it. And then we went back up the hill to try it again from this angle. And it went on down pretty steady, and then it looked like it was going to hit my car. And I got kind of nervous, so I started to chase after it. But it barely missed it and just went on out into the field. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball for quite a while now, and I'm out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart, and they had so many colored rubber bands. I got them and then went back to carry even more and then left. I went home and started with this pack I ordered, and I placed the entire pile. And done. And then I took a break and came back later with all the colored rubber bands. I dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot, and got busy placing them for what felt like an eternity, because this is probably the biggest pile I've ever placed. And it's huge. It now weighs 30 pounds, is way bigger than my head, is pretty hard to throw, and almost impossible to make a basket with, and I can even stand on it. Like if you think I should keep going. So this is part 18 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm just going to keep going. So I went to Walmart and got like 9 packs of colored rubber bands, then left, went home, and dumped them all out into a giant pile, and got busy placing them. And I placed the entire pile, which took quite a while. And then I left and took a break and came back later with this bag. I dumped it out and placed that entire pile. And eventually I was done. And it weighs a lot. It's bigger than my head. It's pretty hard to make a basket with. I can stand on it and really hard to throw. Like if you think I should keep going. So I'm back at it again with the rubber band ball, and I need more rubber bands again. So I went to Walmart and counted out like 12 packs of rubber bands in the floor, and then grabbed them all and went home. And I first started with the pack I ordered on Amazon to match the surface of the ball, and after I was done with that, I took a break and came back later to place all the colored rubber bands. I dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot, and then began placing them for quite a while until I was done. And the scale said it weighed 39 pounds, so I double checked on another one and it said the same thing. It's really hard to throw and officially impossible to make a basket with now, but I can stand on it, kinda. Like if you think I should keep going. So I'm now to part 20 of this, which is crazy, and I'm just gonna keep going. So I went to Walmart and bought all the colored rubber bands they had, then went home and dumped them all out into a pile. And then I got busy placing them until I was done with that pile. Then I got the 2 packs I ordered, dumped them all out into a pile, and began placing them until the ball was finished. And it now weighs an astounding 42 pounds. It is very hard to bounce now, and its basketball days are just over. But I am getting better at standing on it, so that's cool. Like if you want me to keep going. So I'm now on part 21 of this rubber band ball, and no one ever seems to want me to stop, so I went to Walmart and bought all the colored rubber bands they had. Then I went home and started out with the bag I ordered on Amazon, and I placed that entire pile. And then I took a break, as usual, and came back to place all the colored rubber bands. And I dumped them all out into a pile, and then placed it all, which took quite a while, but I finished, and it now weighs 45 pounds. Could probably take me out, and I broke my already broken basketball goal with it. But hey, I can stand on it. And like if you want me to keep going. So I'm now to part 22 of this, and everyone just wants more, and more. So I went to Walmart and bought more. I bought all the packs of colored rubber bands I could carry, and then I went home and dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot. And then I got busy placing all the bands, which took so long I almost quit. But I didn't, and it's done, and now weighs 48 pounds. And it's like 3 times the size of my head and can even crush a can of Flex Seal. Wow. And I'm also able to fully balance on it now, like if I should keep on going. So it's now part 23, and I'm really starting to think it's never going to end. But that's okay. I went to Walmart and, bought a bunch of colored rubber bands, then went home, dumped them all out into a nice pile, and then I started placing them. And it's to the point now where the bands sometimes break, and it hurts. I took a break, as usual, and came back to place this bag I ordered on Amazon, and I placed it, and the ball now weighs over 51 pounds. Could probably kill a bear, and is no longer a good basketball. More like a chair. Here's it next to a basketball. And here's my trick shot. Ooh, like if I should keep on going. So it's now to part 24 of making this rubber band ball, and I went to Walmart and got more colored rubber bands. I got a bunch and then went home and started out with this new pack I ordered on Amazon. They were pretty cool and more stretchy than the normal colored rubber bands. I placed that entire pile and then took a break and came back to place all these other colored rubber bands. I dumped them out into a pile and then placed the entire thing until I was done. And I also ordered this little rubber band ball just for fun to look at and stuff. The big one now weighs 55 pounds and is pretty hard to get down the stairs. And compared to the little one, they bounce similar, but I can stand on this one and not on this one. And I can toss this one, but not this one. Like if you want me to keep on going. So one day I decided to take my giant water balloon and throw my rubber band ball on it to see if it would break it. I set it down in the yard, tied the zip tie and hose around it, and then let it fill up until it was all the way full. Then I took the hose out, sealed it again, and put the rubber band ball on it. And it just kind of rolled off at first, so I dropped it on it, and it stood up. So I threw it on it, and it busted. Here's a slow-mo. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of damage. Let me know any other ideas you have. So I'm now to part 25 of this giant rubber band ball, and everyone just wants more and more and more. So I ordered these new rubber bands on Amazon, and they were way too small. So I got sad, and then I went to Walmart and bought a bunch of colored rubber bands, and then went home. Then I, dumped them out into a pile and started placing them, which took longer than usual for some reason. But I finished, then took a break and came back later to place these other colored rubber bands I ordered. I placed that entire pile, and the ball kind of looks like Spider-Man now, and weighs 57 pounds. I took it downstairs and outside, then threw it and sat on it, and it's also way bigger than my head, and I can stand on it. So, if you want me to keep going. So I'm now to part 26 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm gonna keep on going. I ordered these bigger rubber bands on Amazon, and they weren't as small as the last ones, but they were still really hard to stretch around the ball. And I dumped them all out into a pile and placed it, and it was harder to place than any other pile I've ever placed. And it was exhausting, so I left and came back the next day to place 2 more packs of them. And I placed that pile, and it now weighs 61 pounds. I took it downstairs and compared it to this ball, then threw it, and then stood on it, kinda. More like sat on it. Anyway, if you want me to keep on going. So one day someone commented to drop my rubber band ball from somewhere high, and I don't live anywhere where I can really do that because it weighs 65 pounds and could hurt someone. So I took it to this abandoned race car track, took it to the second story, and dropped it. And it bounced and then just rolled into the ground, and I was like, I gotta do something else. So I went down to this pipe, and I'm like, can I put it in there? So I looked, and it just gradually got smaller, so my ball would have got stuck. Glad I didn't do that. But I just ended up throwing it off, and it bounced off into the fence. And it got this mark on it. Oh well, let me know what else I should do with my rubber band ball. So one day someone commented for me to drop my rubber band ball in glass. So I went to Walmart and bought a bunch of different glass items, then went home, laid out a tarp, and started with this glass vase. I set it down, then got the rubber band ball and threw it on it. And here's the slow-mo. It completely shattered and tore rubber bands off my rubber band ball. Yeah, I didn't expect that much, so I got this more solid piece of glass, laid it down, and crushed it. And here's that slow-mo. It was obliterated as well, and knocked a bunch more bands off. My ball is pretty mutilated. I washed some of the glass off, and there was a glass piece stuck in it. Comment what else I should try. So I'm now all the way to part 27 of my rubber band ball, and I need more bands, so I ordered these big rubber bands and started placing them. And these bands are really hard to place, so this was really exhausting. So I took a break and then came back later to place these colored rubber bands and make it look good. I placed the entire pile, and it now weighs 65 pounds. I let it roll out to the cul-de-sac, picked it up, threw it down, then tried to stand on it, then threw it again, and then my brother tried to stand on it. And if you want me to keep on going. So one day someone commented that I should cover my rubber band ball in Flex Seal, and seeing as I broke it and it needed a little bit of fixing because there's glass shards on it, I thought, why not? So I rolled it out to my yard and started spraying it. I sprayed all around it until it was done. Actually, I gave it a little bit more and then let it sit. And the next day I came back and it had rained, but it was still solid compared to the side that wasn't Flex Seal. I picked it up and took it out to the cul-de-sac, and it bounced the same and was just kind of stale. I rolled it into the basketball goal. Boom. Then stood on it, and let me know what else I should do. So it's now to part 28 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I ordered more rubber bands. I dumped them out and placed them. And when I was finished with that, I got out these garbage bag rubber bands that I ordered that are also pretty colorful. And then I placed another pile of those ones. And it now weighs 68 pounds. I took it downstairs, out to the yard, into the cul-de-sac, and look at it next to a basketball. Ordinary basketball and hoop. Rubber band ball and hoop. Tossing basketball, tossing band ball. But I can stand on this one. If you want me to keep on going.